The alarm bells rang across the UES Liberty as Admiral Jake Morrison rushed to the command bridge. His boots echoed in the metal corridors of humanity's flagship diplomatic vessel as crew members hurried past him with worried faces. Something big was happening, and Jake knew it would change everything for the human race. Captain Lisa Warren stood at the main communication console with her hands shaking slightly. She had been working as the ship's xenobiologist for 12 years but had never seen anything like this before. The message that came through their deep space receivers was unlike any communication they had received from alien species in the past. "Admiral Morrison to the bridge immediately," the ship's computer announced again. Jake was already there, looking at the massive alien fleet that appeared on their long-range sensors. 3,000 ships hung in space like dark metal clouds, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. "What do we have, Captain Warren?" Jake asked as he took his position at the command center. Lisa turned to face him with pale skin and wide eyes. She had been translating alien languages for most of her career, but this message made her hands tremble. "Sir, it's from something called the Hegemony Council. They say they represent 12 different alien civilizations that have ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. The message is clear, and there's no room for misunderstanding what they want from us." Chief Communications Officer Ryan Davis walked over to them carrying a datapad with the full translation. He had worked day and night to make sure every word was correct because the message would decide the fate of every human being alive. His usually calm face showed signs of stress and fear. "Admiral, they're giving us an ultimatum. All human colonies beyond Earth's solar system must be abandoned within 72 hours. We have to submit to their oversight and become what they call a protected species under their rule. If we agree, Earth will be spared from complete destruction." Jake felt his stomach drop as the words sunk in. Humanity had worked for over a century to build 17 different star systems with millions of people living on colonies scattered across space. The idea of abandoning all of them seemed impossible to accept. "Protected species," Jake repeated, slowly. "What exactly does that mean, Captain Warren?" Lisa looked at her research notes and shook her head with disgust. "From what I can understand from their communication patterns, it means we would live under their complete control. They would make all decisions for us about where we can go, what we can do, and how we can live our lives." Ryan Davis added more disturbing information from his analysis of the alien message. "Sir, there are references to something they call compliance modification. It sounds like they would change our brains somehow to make us more obedient to their orders." The command bridge fell silent as everyone processed what this meant. The choice was simple but terrible. Become slaves to alien masters or face destruction from a fleet that could wipe out humanity without much effort. Jake immediately opened a secure communication channel to Earth. President Helen Carter appeared on the main screen within minutes, her face showing the same shock and worry that filled the Liberty's bridge. She had been leading the United Colonies Assembly for 6 years and had always hoped that first contact with advanced aliens would bring good things for humanity. "Admiral Morrison, I've received the same message from the alien fleet. The Assembly is meeting an emergency session right now to discuss our options. How much time do we have to make this decision?" "Less than 72 hours, Madam President. Their fleet is massive, and their technology appears to be far beyond anything we possess. Our weapons would be like throwing rocks at armored vehicles." While Jake spoke with President Carter, Pete Jackson worked frantically in the engineering section of the Liberty. The young engineer had been scanning the alien ships with every sensor the humans possessed, trying to learn something that might help them understand what they were really dealing with. What Pete found made his blood run cold. The alien technology scans showed something that the Hegemony had not mentioned in their ultimatum. The compliance modification they spoke of was not just about following orders. It involved genetic changes that would alter human DNA and memory, modification that would erase parts of who they were as individuals. Pete ran to the bridge with his findings, interrupting the conversation between Jake and President Carter. "Admiral, you need to see this immediately. The protection they're offering isn't protection at all. They plan to change us into something completely different." Jake looked at Pete's data and felt anger rising in his chest. The aliens weren't just asking humans to surrender their freedom. They wanted to destroy everything that made them human in the first place. President Carter saw the same information on her screens back on Earth. Her face hardened with determination as she understood what humanity really faced. Admiral, I'm calling for an immediate vote across all 17 star systems. Every colony, every outpost, every human settlement will have a say in what we do next. The next several hours passed like a nightmare as the truth about the hegemony's ultimatum spread across human space. Communications flowed between Earth, Mars Colony, New Denver, New Pittsburgh, Proxima Station, and all the other human settlements scattered among the stars. Jake watched the responses come in from each colony with growing amazement. Despite facing certain death, despite knowing they could not win against such overwhelming force, the humans were making their choice clear. Colony after colony reported the same decision. They would rather die as free humans than live as modified slaves. President Carter appeared on screens, across all human settlements to deliver humanity's final answer to the Hegemony Council. Her voice was steady and strong, as she spoke words that would echo through history. To the Hegemony Council, humanity has heard your ultimatum, and we have made our choice. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not submit to your rule. We will not allow you to modify our minds or change our genetic code. We choose to remain human, whatever the cost may be. The alien fleet began moving toward human space as President Carter's message reached them. They had expected easy surrender from a primitive species that could not possibly stand against their superior technology. They had no idea that they were about to face something they had never encountered before in thousands of years of conquest, a species that valued freedom more than life itself. News of humanity's defiant answer spread like wildfire across the 17 star systems. On Mars Colony, Governor Nick Phillips stood in the command center watching reports flood in from every human settlement. The red planet's domed cities buzzed with activity as millions of people prepared for what seemed like certain doom. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked without sleep in her laboratory beneath New Angeles, the largest city on Mars. She had dedicated her life to studying alien technology, recovered from crashed ships and abandoned outposts found over the years. Now her research had become humanity's only hope of understanding their enemies. Governor Phillips, you need to see what I've found in these hegemony ship scans, Amy said as she called him to her lab. Her eyes were red from staring at computer screens for 18 straight hours, but her voice carried excitement mixed with fear. Nick hurried down to the underground research facility where Amy had spread out holographic displays, showing detailed images of the alien fleet. Each ship was a work of art and engineering that made human vessels look like primitive boats made from scrap metal. Their technology is at least 500 years ahead of ours, Amy explained while pointing to various parts of the alien ship. Designs. But there's something strange about how their ships are organized. Everything follows exact patterns. Every vessel is positioned in precise formations. It's like they can't think outside of predetermined rules. Meanwhile, on the mining world of New Denver, Colony Administrator Ben Clark was organizing the evacuation of civilian populations to hidden underground facilities. The planet's surface was covered with mining equipment and industrial complexes that had fed raw materials to human space for decades. Kate Murphy, Ben's security chief, worked with local miners and engineers to create guerrilla-resistant cells in the deep tunnels beneath the planet's surface. These tough men and women had spent their lives digging through solid rock and were not about to give up their homes without a fight. If those aliens want our world, they'll have to come down into our tunnels and take it piece by piece, Kate told the assembled miners. We know every cave, every passage, every place to hide. They might have better ships, but they don't know our ground. Far from the main colonies, aboard the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, scientist Dr. Paul Martinez was making discoveries that would change everything. His specialty was studying how different species thought and processed information. What he found in the data about hegemony species made him call an emergency meeting with his research team. Listen to this carefully because it might save the human race, Paul told his colleagues as they gathered around his workstation. Every species in the hegemony shares something called collective consciousness. They're all mentally linked together, sharing thoughts and decisions through some kind of biological network. His assistant, Dr. Carol White, leaned forward with interest. That explains the precise formations Amy Rodriguez found in their ship patterns. They don't think as individuals. They think as a group mind. Paul nodded excitedly. Exactly. But here's what's important. Human brains are completely different. We're not connected to each other. Each person thinks independently. We make decisions based on individual creativity and unpredictable innovation. That's not a weakness like we always thought. It might be our greatest strength. Back on the UES Liberty, Admiral Jake Morrison received reports from across human space as colonies prepared for the coming war. Every message brought the same news. Humans were choosing to fight rather than surrender, even though the odds were hopeless. From New Harmony, the pacifist settlement that had been founded by people seeking peace above all else, came a message that surprised everyone. Governor Mary Thompson, a philosopher who had spent her life teaching nonviolence, announced that even her peaceful colonists would resist the hegemony. We cannot choose peace if it means giving up our humanity, Mary's message said. True peace can only exist when people are free to choose it for themselves. Forced compliance is not peace, it is death of the soul. Commander Steve Powell, leader of the Colonial Defense Force, found himself with an impossible task. He had to prepare humanity's fleet of 800 ships to face an enemy force nearly 4 times larger. With technology they could barely understand. Every military expert agreed that conventional tactics would fail completely. Steve called together his top officers in a secure meeting aboard the UES Defiant. These men and women had spent their careers preparing for conflicts with other human colonies or space pirates. None of them had ever imagined they would need to fight advanced aliens for the survival of their species. Colonel Diana Ross, Steve's chief tactical officer, spoke the truth that everyone was thinking, but afraid to, say out loud. We can't win this war using normal military strategy. Their ships are too advanced and their numbers are too great. We need to accept that we're not fighting to win. We're fighting so that humanity dies free instead of living as slaves. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. But they also carried a strange kind of hope. If humans were going to lose anyway, they could at least make sure their enemies paid a terrible price for victory. They could die in a way that would be remembered across the galaxy. Dr. Martinez sent his research findings to military commanders across human space. His discovery about collective consciousness versus individual thinking gave them the beginning of an idea. If aliens thought as a group, they might not be able to handle opponents who acted unpredictably as individuals. Amy Rodriguez worked with this information to begin developing new tactical approaches. Instead of fighting like a traditional military force with coordinated attacks and predetermined strategies, human ships could operate independently. Each captain would make decisions based on instinct and creativity rather than following orders from headquarters. On Earth, President Helen Carter met with the leaders of every major nation and colony. The United Colonies Assembly had become a war council, preparing for humanity's final stand. Intelligence reports showed the hegemony fleet moving steadily toward human space, destroying everything in their path. My fellow humans, President Carter addressed the billions of people watching across 17 star systems. We have made our choice and we will live with the consequences. In 72 hours, we told the Hegemony Council that we would rather die as free humans than live as modified slaves. Now we must prove that our words have meaning. Children were evacuated from the outer colonies while adults prepared to defend their homes. Weapons were distributed to civilians who had never held guns before. Mining equipment was converted into improvised explosives. Transport ships were modified to carry weapons instead of cargo. The hegemony fleet continued its approach toward human space, expecting to find a defeated enemy ready to surrender. Their collective consciousness shared confidence that this primitive species would realize the futility of resistance and accept the inevitable. They had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same ultimatum followed by overwhelming force. But humanity was preparing something the hegemony had never encountered before in thousands of years of expansion across the galaxy. They were about to face an enemy that would rather die fighting than live in chains. An enemy that valued individual freedom more than collective survival. An enemy that would fight not because they could win, but because they could not bear to lose what made them human. The 72-hour deadline passed with no word from humanity, except the steady preparation for war. The Hegemony Council expected immediate surrender when their massive fleet appeared at the edge of human space, but instead, they found something they had never encountered before in their thousands of years of conquest. Captain Frank Miller commanded a small destroyer squadron near the mining asteroid New Pittsburgh when the first Hegemony scout ships arrived. His 5 vessels looked like toys compared to the alien cruisers that emerged from hyperspace, but Frank had no intention of running away from the fight that would determine humanity's fate. "All ships, this is Captain Miller," he broadcast to his small fleet. "Remember what we learned from Dr. Martinez about alien collective consciousness. They think as a group, so they won't expect us to act individually. Every captain makes his own decisions. Don't wait for orders from me or anyone else. Trust your instincts and make them pay for every inch of space." Lieutenant Commander Jane Bell, commanding the UES Defiant, felt her heart pound as 20 Hegemony cruisers approached her position. Her ship was designed to fight pirates and smugglers, not advanced alien warships that could probably destroy her vessel with a single shot. But Jane had volunteered for this mission knowing she would probably die, and she was determined to make her death count for something. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their collective consciousness coordinating every movement with mathematical precision. They had fought this same battle hundreds of times against dozens of different species. The outcome was always the same: overwhelming technological superiority leading to swift victory and submission. But Jane Bell did something no collective consciousness could predict or understand. Instead of retreating or attacking in a coordinated pattern, she ordered her ship to accelerate directly toward the largest enemy cruiser at maximum speed. Her crew thought she had lost her mind, but they followed her orders because they trusted her judgment. The Hegemony tactical computers tried to calculate Jane's intention, but individual human creativity was beyond their ability to process. Their collective consciousness shared confusion as the small human ship approached on what appeared to be a suicide run. They expected the vessel to change course or fire weapons, but Jane had something else in mind. At the last possible moment, Jane ordered her ship to flip upside down and fire every weapon directly into the underside of the alien cruiser, where their sensors showed the weakest armor. The maneuver was so unexpected that the Hegemony ship could not adjust its defenses in time. Jane's weapons tore through their hull and caused massive explosions that destroyed the entire vessel. The destruction of a Hegemony cruiser by a tiny human destroyer sent shockwaves through the alien collective consciousness. In thousands of years of warfare, no primitive species had ever managed to destroy one of their advanced warships in single combat. The implications were disturbing to minds that thought in terms of mathematical certainties. Frank Miller watched Jane's impossible victory with amazement, but he knew the cost would be terrible. 20 alien ships focused all their weapons on the UES Defiant, and Jane's vessel vanished in a ball of fire and debris. However, her sacrifice had shown that Hegemony ships could be destroyed if humans fought unpredictably enough. "All ships, follow Lieutenant Commander Bell's example," Frank broadcast to his remaining vessels. "Individual action, unpredictable tactics, make them guess what we're going to do next because they can't understand how individual minds work." The battle that followed was unlike anything the Hegemony had experienced in their long history of conquest. Each human ship captain made independent decisions based on instinct and creativity. They used tactics that violated every rule of space combat, but somehow achieved results that their collective consciousness could not predict. Captain Roy Adams piloted his destroyer in a spinning pattern that made no tactical sense but confused the alien targeting systems. Commander Beth Parker used her ship's mining laser to blind enemy sensors before attacking from an unexpected angle. Lieutenant Jack Foster actually rammed his damaged vessel into an alien cruiser, destroying both ships, but taking dozens of enemy crew with him. Frank Miller's squadron was completely destroyed, but they accomplished something that changed the nature of the war. They proved that human unpredictability could overcome alien technological superiority, at least sometimes. More importantly, they transmitted all their battle data back to human command centers throughout the 17 star systems. Dr. Amy Rodriguez studied the battle recordings with growing excitement. Every human victory had come from individual decisions that broke conventional military rules. The aliens fought like a machine, precise and coordinated, but unable to adapt to completely unexpected actions. "Governor Phillips, I think I understand what happened out there," Amy told Nick as they reviewed the data from New Pittsburgh. "The hegemony ships are designed to fight other collective consciousness species that think in predictable patterns. Human individuality creates chaos in their tactical systems." Nick felt hope rising in his chest for the first time since the ultimatum arrived. "Can we use this information to develop new fighting techniques?" Amy nodded enthusiastically. "I'm already working on tactical algorithms based on randomness and individual initiative. Instead of coordinated fleet actions, we'll fight using small, independent units that can adapt and improvise without central command." On Earth, President Helen Carter received reports of the first battle with mixed emotions. The human losses were heartbreaking, but the destruction of multiple hegemony ships proved that resistance was not completely hopeless. She immediately authorized the implementation of Protocol 7, a desperate military plan developed for exactly this situation. Colonel Diana Ross explained Protocol 7 to military commanders across human space. "We abandoned traditional fleet tactics completely. Every ship, every squadron, every battle group operates independently. Captains make their own decisions based on local conditions. No central coordination, no predictable patterns, no collective strategy." The plan sounded like military chaos to officers trained in conventional warfare, but the battle at New Pittsburgh had shown that chaos might be humanity's greatest weapon against an enemy that thought in terms of perfect order and coordination. News of the battle spread across human space with the speed of light-speed communication. On New Denver, Ben Clark received word that some alien ships had actually been destroyed by human vessels. The impossible had happened, and suddenly total defeat no longer seemed certain. Kate Murphy gathered her resistance fighters in the deep, mining tunnels to share the news. "Those aliens can be killed," she told the assembled miners. "They're not gods or demons. They're just another enemy that bleeds when you hit them hard enough in the right place." The mining world began preparing traps and ambushes in their underground complexes. If hegemony forces tried to occupy New Denver, they would find themselves fighting an enemy that knew every tunnel and cave on the planet. The aliens might win eventually, but they would pay a terrible price for their victory. Admiral Jake Morrison aboard the UES Liberty coordinated humanity's response to the advancing hegemony fleet. Instead of massing his forces for a traditional battle, he scattered human ships across dozens of star systems. Each group would fight independently, using the lessons learned from Frank Miller's sacrifice at New Pittsburgh. The Hegemony Council found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a species that actually became more dangerous after suffering losses, that learned from defeat and adapted their tactics in completely unpredictable ways. The collective consciousness that had ruled the galaxy for millennia began to experience something unknown to them: doubt about the outcome of a war. 2 months had passed since the first battle at New Pittsburgh, and the war had become something the Hegemony Council never expected. Their massive technological advantage meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight by any recognizable rules. Human forces under General Chris Anderson had developed what they called chaos tactics, where individual units operated with complete independence. Dr. Paul Martinez, working aboard Proxima Station, had been studying captured alien technology day and night since the war began. His research into collective consciousness networks had led to a breakthrough that could change everything. The key was not just understanding how alien minds work together, but figuring out how to disrupt their mental connections. "Carol, look at these brainwave patterns," Paul called to his assistant, Dr. Carol White, as she entered his laboratory. The room was filled with holographic displays showing the neural activity of different species. Human brain patterns looked completely chaotic compared to the orderly waves produced by hegemony species. Carol studied the data with growing excitement. "Paul, human consciousness doesn't just think differently from collective minds. Our neural patterns actually create interference with their mental networks. We're like static on their radio frequencies." Paul nodded eagerly. "Exactly, and I think we can use this to build a weapon." If we can broadcast human brainwave patterns at the right frequency, we might be able to disrupt their collective consciousness completely. Imagine alien crews suddenly unable to coordinate with each other or access their shared knowledge base. The first test of Paul's consciousness disruption technology took place during a raid on a hegemony supply depot near the edge of human space. Major Tony Garcia volunteered to pilot the experimental ship equipped with Paul's neural broadcast device. Tony was a veteran fighter pilot who had volunteered for every dangerous mission since the war began. Major Garcia, remember that we have no idea what will happen when you activate the disruption field, General Anderson warned during the mission briefing. You might destroy the enemy fleet, or the device might overload and destroy your own ship. We're asking you to test a completely unknown weapon. Tony grinned with the confidence of a man who had already faced death a dozen times. General, I've been flying suicide missions for 2 months. At least this time there's a chance I might survive and take a bunch of aliens with me. The raid began like any other desperate human attack against overwhelming odds. Tony's small squadron approached the hegemony depot where dozens of alien ships were refueling and resupplying. The human vessels looked tiny compared to the massive alien cruisers that began moving to intercept them. But when Tony activated Paul's neural disruption device, something unprecedented happened. The chaotic patterns of human consciousness broadcast from his ship struck the alien fleet like an invisible weapon. Suddenly, ships that had been moving in perfect coordination began drifting aimlessly through space. The collective consciousness that linked all hegemony crews was shattered by the interference from human brainwaves. Alien officers found themselves thinking as individuals for the first time in their lives, confused and unable to access the shared knowledge that had guided their species for thousands of years. Tony watched in amazement as the entire enemy fleet lost all coordination. Ships collided with each other as their crews struggled to operate without collective guidance. Some vessels simply shut down completely as their crews experienced mental breakdown from sudden individual consciousness. All human units, this is Major Garcia, Tony broadcast to his squadron. The neural disruptor is working beyond our wildest expectations. Enemy forces are completely disabled. Move in and capture what you can before they figure out how to adapt. Raid succeeded beyond anything humans had dared to hope. They captured an entire hegemony supply depot along with dozens of alien ships and thousands of crew members. More importantly, they proved that human consciousness itself could be used as a weapon against collective minds. News of Tony's success spread across human space faster than official military communications. Dr. Amy Rodriguez on Mars Colony began working around the clock to build more neural disruptor devices based on Paul's research. Every human ship in the fleet needed this new weapon if they were going to have any chance of winning the war. The tide began turning during what became known as the Battle of the Outer Rings, where Admiral Jake Morrison commanded humanity's main fleet in what should have been their final stand. The hegemony had gathered over 1,000 ships to crush human resistance once and for all. Jake's fleet numbered only 300 vessels, but every ship was now equipped with neural disruption technology. As the alien armada approached in their typical perfect formations, Jake gave the order that would either save humanity or destroy what remained of their military forces. All ships activate neural disruptors on my mark, Jake commanded from the bridge of the UES Liberty. Remember, we're not just fighting for our own survival. Every species in this galaxy that values individual freedom is counting on us to prove it can be done. The battle that followed shocked both sides with its outcome. As hundreds of neural disruptors broadcast human consciousness patterns across space, the massive hegemony fleet began falling apart. Ships crashed into each other as their crews lost collective coordination. Entire squadrons shut down as alien officers experienced the terror of thinking alone for the first time. Captain Lisa Warren, now commanding her own vessel, the UES Freedom, led a strike team deep into the heart of the confused enemy fleet. Her mission was to capture a hegemony command ship intact so human scientists could study their most advanced technology and battle plans. Lisa's team found the alien command crew in a state of complete mental breakdown. Officers who had spent their entire lives connected to collective consciousness were now isolated in their own minds, unable to function without constant mental support from their species. The capture was almost too easy. The intelligence they gathered from the command ship revealed a truth that changed everything about the war. The hegemony wasn't just fighting to conquer humanity. They were terrified of what human defiance represented to their carefully ordered galactic civilization. "Admiral Morrison, you need to see this immediately," Lisa reported as she transmitted the captured data back to Jake's flagship. "The hegemony isn't just worried about our military resistance. They're afraid that individual consciousness will spread to other species." Jake studied the alien intelligence reports with growing understanding. Several client species had already begun questioning their subjugation after witnessing human defiance against impossible odds. The idea of thinking for themselves was spreading, like a virus, through the collective consciousness networks that held the hegemony together. On the prison world of Kepler 442b, Commander Steve Powell led a rescue mission to free captured human colonists. What his team found there proved that the revolution was already spreading beyond humanity. Aliens from 3 different species had chosen to fight alongside the human prisoners rather than return to their collective masters. "Commander Powell, we want to help you fight," said Vex, a reptilian alien who had been a hegemony security officer until he witnessed human courage during a battle. "Your species has shown us something we never knew existed: the right to think for ourselves. We will not go back to being slaves to collective consciousness." Similar reports came from across the war zone. Hegemony crews were beginning to defect, in small numbers. Some alien species were requesting asylum in human space. The careful order that had maintained galactic civilization for millennia was cracking under the pressure of a simple human concept: individual freedom. The Hegemony Council found themselves facing an enemy that grew stronger with each battle, not weaker. Every defeat taught humans new ways to fight. Every victory inspired more alien species to question their masters. The war was becoming something far more dangerous than a simple conquest. It was becoming a revolution that threatened to destroy everything the collective minds had built. 6 months after the hegemony ultimatum that started everything, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. What began as humanity's desperate fight for survival had become a revolution that spread across dozens of star systems. Species that had lived under collective consciousness for thousands of years were experiencing individual thought for the first time. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching reports flow in from across the war zone. Human forces now included ships and crews from 7 different alien species who had chosen freedom over the security of collective minds. The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had expected. The Hegemony Council faced something they never thought possible in their long history of galactic rule. Their own client species were rebelling against the collective consciousness networks that had maintained order for millennia. Entire worlds were declaring independence and requesting protection from the growing alliance of free-thinking species. Dr. Paul Martinez had spent months perfecting his neural disruption technology since the first successful test by Major Tony Garcia. His latest breakthrough was the ultimate weapon against collective consciousness, a broadcast system that didn't just disrupt alien mental networks, but actually offered individual choice to every connected mind. "Jake, this new device doesn't just confuse them," Paul explained during a secure communication from Proxima Station. "It gives every alien in their fleet the chance to experience individual consciousness and choose whether they want to return to collective thinking or remain free." The final test of Paul's technology would come during the climactic battle near Earth itself, where the hegemony made one last desperate attempt to crush the rebellion before it could spread any further. Their remaining fleet of over 2,000 ships represented everything they had left after months of defections and defeats. President Helen Carter watched from Earth as the massive alien armada approached humanity's home system. The irony was not lost on her that the war, which began with an ultimatum to abandon all colonies beyond Earth, would end with a battle to defend humanity's birthworld. "Admiral Morrison, you have complete authority to use any means necessary to protect Earth and end this war," President Carter transmitted to Jake's fleet. "Humanity chose defiance over survival 6 months ago, and we have never regretted that decision." Jake commanded a fleet that would have been unimaginable when the war began. 300 human ships fought alongside vessels from a dozen alien species who had chosen individual consciousness over collective security. The diversity of thinking and tactics available to his forces was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The battle began with the Hegemony fleet advancing in their traditional, perfect formations, but something was different this time. Many of their ships moved reluctantly, crews torn between loyalty to collective consciousness and the growing desire for individual thought that had infected their ranks. "All ships, prepare to activate the final neural broadcast," Jake commanded, from the Liberty's bridge. "This isn't just about disrupting their coordination anymore. We're offering every alien mind in that fleet the choice between collective slavery and individual freedom." Captain Lisa Warren, now Admiral Warren commanding her own task force, coordinated the broadcast from dozens of ships throughout the human fleet. The neural disruptor technology had evolved far beyond Paul's original design into something that could reach every collective consciousness network simultaneously. When the broadcast activated, the effect was immediate and stunning. Across the Hegemony fleet, thousands of alien crew members experienced individual consciousness for the first time in their species' history. The collective networks that had guided their civilizations for millennia suddenly became optional rather than mandatory. The result was chaos, unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Some alien ships immediately ceased hostilities as their crews chose individual freedom over collective warfare. Other vessels experienced complete breakdown as crew members struggled with the overwhelming responsibility of thinking for themselves. But the most remarkable sight was the ships that began switching sides in the middle of the battle. Entire squadrons of Hegemony vessels turned their weapons against their former allies, choosing to fight for the freedom to think independently rather than maintain the old order of collective consciousness. Commander Steve Powell, leading a mixed squadron of human and alien ships, watched in amazement as a massive Hegemony battleship broadcast surrender signals and requested permission to join the Free Alliance. The crew had voted to abandon collective consciousness and embrace individual thought. "This is Captain Zara of the vessel that was once called Collective Unity," the alien commander transmitted. "We choose freedom over certainty, chaos over order, individual thought over collective security. We request permission to fight alongside those who gave us this choice." The battle that should have been humanity's final stand became instead the collapse of the Hegemony's galactic empire. As species after species chose individual consciousness over collective control, the careful order that had maintained civilization for thousands of years crumbled within hours. The Hegemony Council, faced with the complete dissolution of everything they had built, sent a communication that shocked both sides. It was not another ultimatum or threat of destruction, but a plea for negotiation and terms of surrender. To the human leadership and their allies, the message began. "We acknowledge that our understanding of galactic civilization was incomplete. We request negotiations to establish new relationships based on voluntary cooperation rather than collective control." President Carter received the alien surrender request with emotions ranging from relief to amazement. Humanity had not just survived their choice of defiance over submission, they had fundamentally changed the nature of civilization in their corner of the galaxy. The negotiations that followed established the first Galactic Council of Free Worlds, with Captain Lisa Warren serving as humanity's first ambassador to the new organization. Every member species maintained complete autonomy, while choosing to cooperate voluntarily for mutual benefit. The principles that guided the new galactic government were simple but revolutionary. No species would be forced to join collective consciousness networks. Every individual had the right to think independently. Cooperation would be based on choice rather than compulsion. Dr. Paul Martinez became the director of the Institute for Consciousness Studies, helping newly liberated species adapt to individual thought while maintaining their cultural identities. His research had shown that diversity of thinking was not a weakness, but the greatest strength any civilization could possess. On worlds across the galaxy, children of formerly collective species experienced individual consciousness as their natural birthright rather than a terrifying anomaly. Schools taught the value of independent thought alongside cooperation and mutual respect. The transformation was not without challenges. Some species struggled with the responsibility of individual choice after millennia of collective guidance. Others fragmented into competing factions as different groups made different decisions about their futures. But the overall result was a galaxy more vibrant and creative than anyone had imagined possible. Art, science, and philosophy flourished as individual minds brought unique perspectives to problems that collective consciousness had approached with rigid uniformity. Admiral Jake Morrison, now serving as the first commander of the Free Worlds, Defense Force established the principle that would guide military actions in the new galactic order. Force would be used only to protect the right of species to choose their own path, never to impose any particular form of government or consciousness. The memorial built on New Pittsburgh, where the first human victory had proven that resistance was possible, bore a simple inscription that became the motto of the new galactic civilization: "Live free or die free, but never live as slaves." Years later, when young beings from dozens of species asked why humans had chosen to fight against impossible odds rather than accept safety through submission, the answer always came back to the same fundamental truth. Some things are more important than survival. The right to think for yourself, to choose your own path, to remain true to what you are rather than what others want you to become. Humanity's choice of defiance over survival had given the galaxy something it never knew it was, missing the freedom to choose freedom itself.